We have within the previous consultations and then recommendations to governments, we have an open category investigation coming up, which I have to say those three words fill me with something dread when I hear the word investigation. But what does this actually mean, and how far-reaching are you expecting this to be? Is this the case of okay, we have the adopted regulation, etc., and we need to tweak that, or is this actually let's start again if needed and let's review every single thing about the open category?
Yeah, so this isn't certainly a case of tearing up the rule book. We don't want to do that. Okay. One of the most important safety principles in aviation is stability, right? Things shouldn't be changing often. Stability is important for safety because if you understand the regulatory framework in which you're operating under, you're probably likely to be safer. So if that keeps changing, that can impact on safety. What we do want, and again, this is me being completely open, honest, and transparent, is to provide the regulated community the opportunity to tell the CAA, the regulator, how are they getting on with the open category, sort of, what is it now, 2 years after implementation. Clearly, this was something that the regulated community had to adopt. It went in, it was that, hey, you're doing this. And now this is an opportunity to go, how's it going? Yep. Any challenges? Any issues? Do you like this? Do you not like that? Especially for the open category and recreational operators, we want to make it as accessible as possible and as simple to understand as possible. Clearly certified category operations, which is actually my main thrust of work, that's kind of my primary area of responsibility in the CAA, certified category operations. That's going to be very complex with lots of really sort of pernickety pieces of legislation and guidance, and it's going to be very difficult to understand. We want the complete opposite of that for the recreational community, because the perhaps the simpler or more accessible is perhaps a better word. It is to get into it, the safer it is, because you're more likely to be compliant against sort of things that you understand and can appreciate. So that's really what it is. Again, no conspiracy. It's going to be an opportunity, hopefully in 2023 through 2024, for the regulated community who utilize the open category to tell us what they think about it. And there's a couple of parts to that. There's the subcategories. So we know today we have A1, A2, A3, and with the removal of class marking, that's predominantly based on weight and where you're operating. And then we have this additional question that perhaps needs to be fleshed out a bit more of, if we are going to introduce sort of assurance levels on drones being flown in the open category, whatever that might look like product standards or whatever that might look like, how's that going to affect you as a member of the regulated community? And what perhaps additional provisions would that allow you to fly under if you were using some form of assured platform? There's lots of additional considerations, and I'll raise them just to sort of reiterate and reinforce my point of, there are lots of stakeholders views that the CAA have to take into account. Clearly, the community themselves is a very important stakeholder. We also have to take into account things like the security services. So the policing of UAS, that they are clearly a very important stakeholder that we need to have conversations with around the open category as well. And they'll form part of that conversation, as will many other sort of groups across the UK. This isn't, primarily it's about community, how you're getting on, and then we look at all of our other stakeholders to gauge their feedback. And then hopefully what we end up with off the back of that is a really sort of robust and nice and accessible framework for recreational users to enjoy the hobby.
Okay. In terms of the open category investigation, and you were talking about other stakeholders, etc., in there, is there any kind of a direction that the CAA is probably going to be taking on this? Are we going to see more restrictions on sub 250 gram flights, or is there anything that's looking likely at the moment?
No. So what I can say categorically is we have made no formal decision whatsoever yet.
Okay.
What decision we do make will involve contributions from the regulated community prior to doing so. And that's the truth.
Up next, and this is a topic which has come up more so in the last week or so with the AMC being released and the 722 and the issues that people have raised with the 722 and that type of thing. And that's and actually even as far back as the C label announcement and the conversation around that. And that's how the CAA communicates with the regulated community. So from everybody from recreational all the way through to the other stakeholders, such as commercial, professional operators and RAEs, all the way through, basically, media, including myself, etc. There seems to be a general feeling in the regulated community that they don't feel like the CAA are communicating with them effectively, essentially. Is that something which you are aware of, and is there any way that can be improved as such?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think there's probably multiple nuances to this.
Yes.
I think we try to do an awful lot to, canvass the widest audience possible and make the most use of our people's time to get the most messaging out as possible. Now, what that creates is it's kind of a best for most, but it does sort of potentially create individual factions of the industry going, well, I want my individual conversation, I want my individual point of view. And they are clearly really important. And we do have mechanisms in place and procedures in place, things like the key stakeholders meeting, where we do try and bring sort of certain sections of the community in to listen to their voices. There are networks, things like model aircraft associations, where rather than having the impossible task of dealing with thousands and thousands of responses from them, they're sort of collated, triaged, and pushed through the association that the CAA received. So, whereas you might think that perhaps your comment hasn't been sort of listened to or absorbed by the CAA, it's quite likely that it's actually just reached us through a different medium or perhaps through an association. Can we do better? Can we do more? Of course, we can always do more. Do we want to do more? Yes. There's a formal way we do this, and it's through consultations. And that's our formal mechanism. So if we are to make sort of a significant change, we'll do it through consultation. And I think we've seen that through the acceptable means of compliance and guidance material. The feedback on that was incredible. And I'll always be thankful to the regulated community for doing that. And then what that's resulted in is documentation that was published last week, that the acceptable means of compliance and guidance material, that's really robust and fit for purpose. Will we continue to do that? Absolutely. I think the CAP 72 amendment, they were primarily revisions to ensure that CAP 722 series of documents was compliant against the new AMC and GM, right? So there weren't some kind of huge revision to the point where we considered this needs to go through consultation, because what it was really meant to be is removing the discrepancies between our new AMC GM, which sits above CAP 722, and ensuring that they're compliant with it. So I think that's, if that's perhaps a reason why we didn't consult on 722 broadly through a formal consultation, that's probably the reason why. Did we involve select stakeholders in that conversation? Absolutely. Is there an opportunity for perhaps the CA to create some more transparent procedures to show how people become those sort of trusted members of the community in terms of viewing documents, giving feedback, responding to them? I think so, and we're working on that internally. The important thing for me here isn't that we have sort of an identified perfect angle, it's that we're just making progress, it's that we're moving forward. So as long as we're getting continuously better at stakeholder engagement, that's perfect. That's all we need to be doing.
Okay.
We don't need to set this kind of future gold standard. As long as we're making steps, iterative improvements to how we manage stakeholders, then I think that's the right position to be in. I think we are doing that. We are working with our stakeholder engagement manager currently for our pass, looking in the new year to release some communications on sort of a new take on the key stakeholders form, which we'll sort of be releasing information on in the new year. So I think we are taking the right steps. I think there needs to be understanding that stakeholder engagement is critical. We have to do it because there is a significant amount of expertise and experience within that side of the community that we can rely on as a regulator to help us do our job.
Yes.
So it's critical, and everybody in the CAA appreciates that. In the same breath, it's exceptionally resource intensive. And when we're talking about responding to individuals on a sort of email by email point of view, that takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of time from our experts who would otherwise be sort of developing that new piece of AMCGM or looking at how we set up a consultation on the open category. So we have to balance sort of the stakeholder engagement piece against the resources that we have available to us as well. And I think that's just that sort of fact of life and a reality that I think it's really important that I have this conversation with you and your viewers that, that is just the reality in which we live in. It's incredibly important. We want to continue doing it. We want to get better. Of course we do. But we have to weigh it up against sort of resourcing and other considerations and other areas.
Two things which have come up specifically from my recreational audience is firstly, is there a reason, and this may be something to take away and consider, is there a reason why updates that go out via Skywise, etc., which we always recommend the people subscribe to so they can get the hot off the press update, could there be a way of actually emailing out everybody who has an operator ID rather than as well as the Skywise side of things? Because I get that time and time again, particularly from the recreational side, and the people that want to know what's going on but don't necessarily have time to be what they would count as deep diving things all the time to find out what the changes are happening. Is there a reason why that doesn't happen at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, and it's certainly one that we would canvas to the community before us making an arbitrary decision. So perhaps that forms part of the open category consultation later in sort of 23, 24. So we'll take that offline. We do have other mechanisms. We have the podcast that CAA do internally. We have the Skywise. I want a solution here. That's not the place to do it, but perhaps there's some opportunity in the future to, when you do register an operator ID, to click a box and automatically subscribe to Skywise or something like that.
I think you have something there. I think that's an excellent idea because that's very much always the response that I've given, that the Demares scheme, of course, is something which is protected and is, it's there to do a specific job, and again, be simple and clear. And if people start sort of getting, dozens of emails or things that they don't feel like they need to read, you don't want them unsubscribing and then not getting the email to remind them that they need a new operator ID, etc., or a new flyer ID. So it has an important process. But I really like that idea, actually, of just ticking to say. I realise right now somewhere in the bowels of CAA in the tech department, they're saying, "Don't say that. That's not a simple thing to do." But it sounds like a very, very good idea. In terms of the consultations, one thing that I have noticed is that the uptake and the acceptance of the outcome of those consultations seem to be very, very different in the last couple of RPAS consultations that have happened, in terms of the transitional one, which again, and legacy, which again obviously was a very specific topic, so it was able to be a very short and simple consultation. Seemed to have a lot of penetration within the recreational side of things. People knew what was going on and what to expect. On the AMC side of things, I found that people didn't, despite the fact that we had an interview with your colleague James, etc., and we did publicise it, we didn't really get as much penetration with the recreational side, to the point where now with things like the VLOS guidance, etc., there's shock when actually these things have been out in the public domain for some months. Is there something that we could look at there from the point of view that perhaps the content to engage more of perhaps the key stakeholders within all of this that we need the compliance from, i.e. the recreational side? Is there something in terms of making those consultations more accessible? Because the AMC, I felt like I needed 3 monitors open and print off the whole thing and that type of thing.
Yeah, it's a really good question. There are going to be circumstances, especially in the open category, where like the transitional and legacy arrangements, we can have a pretty sort of clear, simple consultation. On the other side, the overwhelming majority of the recreational community, we are perhaps the small minority who are quite vocal. there are hundreds of thousands of members of the recreational community who have full-time jobs that fly maybe once or twice every couple of months in the park, who frankly don't either have the time or don't particularly care about reviewing a 200-page document by the CAA. We are the airspace regulator. We are the specialist. And, if they were to say, well, that's your job to do, they're absolutely right. It's also our job to give the opportunity for those externally who want to provide an opinion to be able to do so. Does that mean we can look at sort of simplifying complex documentation? Probably not. If you are committed enough to the point where you would like to be part of that conversation and contribute, well, I'm afraid you're going to have to sort of put some time aside to review that documentation. If you don't have the time to do that, well, that's unfortunate. But I mean, that's just a reality. What I don't want to do to you here, and what I won't do is come up with something that's like, we'll make it really easy in the future.
Yeah. And
review
it
a
not happen.
100-page
Yes.
document in one page. I want to reflect reality, right?
Yes.
And the reality is, we do talk about it, and we actually tried to go a step further with the AMC and GM. I believe it was perhaps on your video, where James tried to earmark people towards certain sections of, okay, don't read the whole thing, but if you do this, read these 2 pages. So we tried, and we did get some really good feedback. And clearly, members of the regulated community like yourself play a pivotal role in sort of sending that information out when it becomes available for people who perhaps don't subscribe to the Skywise notifications, but are subscribed to yourself, for example. And I think that's just the reality of it.
Okay, and I do wonder, and this is literally just and again, this is probably one of those sort of offline conversations more than, because there isn't really an answer to it per se, because again, much like the regulations have to suit everybody, so does the consultation, of course, and the consultation needs to get to its result as well, of course. So we can't sort of have the AMC broken down into 50 different consultations. We'd be here till 2040 just to get an AMC adopted. But I wonder if there is some kind of comms breakdown that could happen, that actually it is put out of, here are the highlights. This is a 94-page document or something, but actually here, if you are a recreational flyer, here are the highlights. These are the things which we feel you're probably going to be most interested in. Because I wonder if that was done, you would have had more response over the VLOS thing. Not necessarily that you would have suddenly changed, because lots of people said, I don't want to fly VLOS. But actually it would have had that higher level of engagement from the recreational side. But again, as I say, that's probably more an offline thing, and I'm probably getting too geeky and too into the minutiae of what people actually care about. But there you go.
So it's a really important point, and we reflect off the back of every consultation internally. We reflect on the engagement, the comments, and more importantly, we reflect on who didn't comment, what areas of the community didn't comment, who we not seeing comments of.
Okay, excellent.
And off the back of that, we try and use that information to improve future consultation.
Is the open category investigation consultations, are they expected to be a couple of large consultations, or are you expecting to be broken down into several areas?
Yeah, we're really not sure yet. I don't think. What we want them to be, especially the open category consultations, is to be as accessible as possible. So they might be big, they might be small, there might be lots, there might be one big one and a couple of small ones. I don't know is the answer there. One of the things that we have had conversations on is we want to make them absolutely as accessible as possible. And what in my day job, when we're talking about certification, that documentation isn't particularly accessible. It's dealing with very highly complex subject matter. The open category is clearly the opposite, and any consultations that are conducted for the open category will sort of reflect the community members who will be responding to it. Absolutely.